Hi, and welcome to today's presentation of Using Statistical Data to Support Your Library, presented by Thomas Ivie and myself, Paige Bredenkamp. And who are we? Thomas Ivie is the Research and Statistics Librarian at the Wyoming State Library. He manages the annual Wyoming Public Library Survey and the annual Wyoming School Library Survey, as well as the Wyoming Institutions Survey and budget surveys.
And Paige Bredenkamp is the school library consultant at the Wyoming State Library. She helps coordinate the annual Wyoming School Library Survey with myself, Thomas, and designs training presentations for school librarians.
Today's purpose, the purpose of this webinar is to help go through the data that the Wyoming State Library collects each year from school and public libraries. This data is available for use by all of the libraries, but it can be very confusing to sort, to analyze, and to figure out what type of format to put it into. So we're here to help you use this data to tell your story.
So why is data important? Most organizations collect and then analyze the data about their operations, and they use that in order to inform, convince, and make decisions. But even if your organization doesn't collect data, you can use other sources that have collected. For instance, you could use data that has been collected by the Wyoming State Library, other state libraries, the IMLS, Wyoming Department of Education, or whatever state you're in, those sources, or the U.S. Department of Education, and that's just to name a few.
So we can use this data for advocacy purposes. When you want to get the support of community members, they need to know what it is that they're supporting. Using this data that is gathered will help show snapshots of your organization's value. Teton County Library shares with us that they have used data from community surveys in order to give them some guidance on developing their strategic plan.
So you need to make your case when you're using data, whether it's to library boards, administrators, potential funders, or the community at large. Maybe you need to show why you need to increase a collection. So you need to pick your audience and then transform your data to that audience. The South Dakota State Library shared with us that more and more of their public librarians use public library survey data to support requests for staffing. They also get requests for larger material budgets and larger library spaces. Several of their librarians also contact the state library for help in using library statistics and comparison data when they are presenting their annual reports to decision makers, like the city or county commissioners or boards. They also shared with us that most of their requests for data from their school library survey is used for making comparisons with other libraries for budgets and new materials. In fact, most state libraries, including Wyoming, produce some kind of summary for their individual surveys. These summaries can be a good source of data.
Data can also be used for improvement. When you compare different sets of data, for instance, circulation data or budget data, this can help your library staff evaluate their performance and services. A school librarian in Wyoming used data from the school library survey to help prevent a cut to her library budget. She printed out a spreadsheet with data from all of the participating schools, then highlighted the schools that were most similarly sized to hers. The data revealed that the age of her collection was older than those of the other schools. A drop in her budget would not only put her below what their budgets were, but she already had some catching up to do in terms of updating her collection. It was effective in convincing her principal to not cut her budget that year.
Some surveys include open-ended questions as well. You can get more specific information by using open-ended questions. Here is an example of a couple of open-ended questions used by Wyoming's Teton County Library. They used project outcome to survey for their programs that they had done. And one of the questions was, what did you like most about the program? And they can use those to get specific information to aid them in making their programs better, or maybe in choosing topics. They also asked, what could the library do to better assist you with your involvement in the community? These are examples of them putting out questions that aren't yes or no. They don't give you numbers, but they get them more specific information that they can use. And certainly this type of information could be used when doing reports, or depending on the audience that you are reporting to, you would choose how you would portray it to them. So this is a reminder that not all data is numerical. It can be text.
There are lots of places to find data. Our most popular data sets at the Wyoming State Library are the School Library Survey and the Public Library Survey. These are great for Wyoming data, but maybe you want to use regional or national data. And we have links to several data sets on our website.
So we'll just go to the Wyoming State Library's statistics page and go through a few of our products. Like we said, that we do have information on academic libraries. The NCES hasn't done a full survey since 2012, but if you go to their website, they do have some smaller in chunks of information on there that you could use. The Wyoming Public Libraries, we're in the process of getting the 2016 data in, but I'll go through we have the raw data, and by looking at that, here's an example of a summary of the different tables, the different parts of information that we have in the survey. We give a 5-year trend summary, and then some facts about Wyoming libraries during that fiscal year. So you can draw numbers from there, use that data. It's a quick way to get data, and most states provide some kind of summary to their data, because if you look at the raw data or data, it can be difficult to understand. So utilize these and it'll make your life easier. We include about 15 pages of information from our raw data from the survey in this summary, and in some instances we give a little bit additional, like this one has to do with staffing and the librarian FTEs with an MLS. Well, we figured out the percentage for you, and then at the bottom are the totals for the state. So if you were, any of these counties, you could compare it to the state total and see how your library fits in with that overall. We don't do that for all of them, but we do for some of them. And like this one on expenditures, something useful would be the percentage. And the reason it's important to use the percentage is because sometimes you're looking apples to oranges. It's a way you can, if you're a small library, you can compare yourself to a large library, because if you look at the actual number, it's going to be disproportionate. But if you look at the percentage, then it can still give you comparison, a way to compare with those either large or small libraries. So you don't have to compare with all the libraries like yours, but we do break it down by community size for most of these, and so you could compare within your community size as well. Let's see. We do the same with staff expenditures. So basically we go through each and every portion of our category of our survey for that. Oops, shouldn't have done that. There are also some National Public Library data, and these are good sources to look at it depending on your audience and depending on who how you want to present the data, and if you're doing comparisons maybe on a national level or a regional level, these might be useful. I will let Paige talk about the school libraries survey.
Yes, the school library survey is also done every year, and we have the latest set of data for 2015-16. We are currently collecting data for 2016-17, and that will be posted this summer. But we offer summary reports, just like Thomas explained with the public library survey. We have taken the data and compiled it into statewide snapshots of different categories. So if you want to see how the state is doing as far as staffing or expenditures or collections, you can look at this and get an idea of what's going on across the state. The first sets of data that we come to, though, are numbers that are provided by the Wyoming Department of Education. And these are numbers that we cannot change. They are the enrollments, the number of schools, and the number of library staff members throughout the state of Wyoming, and these are reported by each district to the WDE. So we do start with these numbers and we have to stick with them. But this set of data also shows how many schools were reporting data for the 2015-16 school year. And out of 358 schools, we had 160 respond to the survey. But as you go down through the summary, there are paragraphs that help explain how this data can be used and what it means. And our schools are also broken up into different sections. For instance, senior high, which is, we count senior high as 9 through 12, junior senior high 6 through 12, the K-12 schools, the junior high middle schools, and so on down to elementary. This makes it a lot easier to compare your information instead of comparing with the whole K-12 range. If you are an elementary school, then you can compare to other elementaries. And then as we go down through the different categories, you can see how each of these grade level sections measure up as far as the different categories. And again, the summaries, the paragraphs, will explain what this data means. This is great if you want to compare your local data to the statewide, if you want to compare your data to similar size schools and grade levels. And it's also great if you just want a snapshot of the state of Wyoming school libraries.
And I think something important about that school library survey is that that's the only it's the only source of data for school libraries that we have in Wyoming. So it's important that schools do participate in that survey and complete it.
That is a great point, Thomas. And on a national level, surveys and research is not being done on school libraries. And so this is about the only data, especially in Wyoming, but not a lot of states do their own surveys. Some do. But it's really important to get this consistently collected data. And the more schools that participate, the better able we are to see the state of school libraries. Also, after the summary report, if you want to look at your own school's data, we do have the spreadsheet. This is where it can be a little overwhelming, but we'll go through this here quickly. In the spreadsheet, there are different folders for the different categories. So like here we have the libraries. This is simply the libraries that have responded to the survey. We have the category for staffing, and you can scroll down and see the different grade level and sections that have responded. And then you can find your school and find the data. You can, with the enrollment, you can compare according to similarly sized schools. You can compare data, and you can go on through the different categories to find the data that you're looking for. And then there's the survey instrument, and that's the questions that were on the survey if you want to get into that. And then the Wyoming Department of Education data, information, and reports is also listed there. I'll turn this back over to Thomas to continue with different data sets.
Thank you, Paige. Just as we had the national public library data, there's also national school library data as well. So it's important to follow up with your state school library survey. And in Wyoming, we encourage you to fill out the Wyoming one.
Absolutely. And you'll get a certificate.
There's more statistics, and one that we would like to talk about is the Go Wild. If you're in Wyoming, a Wyoming library, you can, let's see, you can click on more, and then we've got the usage statistics. And these are particularly good if you know, some people don't know what they have access to, and they're going to try and get some money for their budget to for their school district to buy some different databases. So you can look and get a list of what's available, because these are available to all
schools, all residents.
Yeah, all residents.
Anybody in Wyoming has access to these.
Yeah.
And these usage statistics are great if you want to go in and see how much use these databases are getting by your school district. Some of them offer detailed statistics according to school. If you're at an academic library, you can see how much usage your college students, or how much usage the databases are getting from your college students. Public libraries also can find their usage statistics, and special libraries as well. These can be correlated to the data that is collected from the surveys. And it gives a really nice snapshot of which databases in particular are being used by your community.
So I clicked on Learning Express Library, and you can see that it's broken down by academic, public, school. You can see if your school district is on the list for getting statistics for it. Mm-hmm. And you can use any of these numbers from any of the database products for making your case. But we just wanted to show you that real quick so that you knew it was there. And then there's also national data and analysis. Some of these are mentioned in some of the others. There's demographic and economic information as well. So if you need some big data to present with, there are some sources here. There's also a ton of other sources out there, so don't just limit it to these. There might be something more specific to what you need.
So you have data. Now what will you do with it? Data is important only if it gets used, and if data is collected but not analyzed, then it isn't helping your organization. Data can be a critical part of your organization if you know how to use it. Looking at the data without knowing the story you want to tell can be an overwhelming task. So take a look at the data and take the time to analyze it and shape it. Find the data you want. That's going to help you tell the story that you want to tell.
You will want to isolate the data you want to use in order to tell your story. The Wyoming Public Library Survey has about 14 pages, as I said before, of data, and that can be a lot to go through. So let's say we want to tell the story of what a library spends on their materials. And this part of that, 14 pages of data, is one of the pages that has that materials expenses. By taking the time to look through that data, we're able to find the correct data that we want to use to present. In this instance, we could just use the data for our own library, so whatever library you're from, or you can make comparisons to other libraries with similar county populations, or say total collection expense. You might even do it utilizing one of the other pages where it mentions what your budget is. So you could compare libraries that have a similar budget to yours as well.
So here is some data from the school library survey of 2015 to 16. Let's say you were one of these 4 schools down here towards the bottom, and you wanted to make the case to purchase a new science and technology collection for your school. From looking at this data, you can make a strong case to update the collection, since the average copyright date for any of them is so far out of date. Even if you had the most current copyright date of them all, the 2004, it's still 13 years out of date. And so it would make sense to use your school's numbers to try and convince administrators that your collection is outdated, because for the science and technology section to be that old, that's pretty well out of date.
And it's important to note that we've done some of the work for you. The total, if you look up above at the other data, the average copyright date for that collection is 1999.
Wow.
So
not even in this millennium.
Yeah. So you can use these things to make your case. The Louisiana State Library creates an annual statistical report and a quick facts publication, which is much like the Wyoming State Library's summary report for their public library survey. Most states produce these, and they can be a great source of data for you to use because they give you quick summaries.
Absolutely. Once we know the story that we want to tell and have the data to support our story, we need a way to communicate it to the audience. Audiences differ. They can be boards, county officials, principals, superintendents, the public, anybody. With any of these audiences, you want to present the information quickly and clearly. While there are many ways to do that, infographics deliver the story of the data in a concise way.
Here we have a couple of quotes on telling your story. One by Stephen Few: "Numbers have an important story to tell. They rely on you to give them a clear and convincing voice." And then another one by Thomas Davenport: "Stories are how numbers talk to people."
Infographics have emerged as one of the most popular and shareable forms of social content because they are effective. They make it easier to interpret the data. They're easy to link to a website, and people like to share visually appealing data.
But your story can get lost if you use too much data. Viewers should be able to understand the information presented in a single reading. So using a theme of graphics that relates to the subject of your story can increase the viewer's attention to the infographic. It is also helpful to use space between the data and text in order to keep the focus of the story for the viewer, as does using simple color schemes. All right, so here we have some examples of some infographics that we've created at the Wyoming State Library. We'll click on them and talk about them. This first one here has to do with the library statewide. We took this information from the Public Library Statistics, the 2014-15, and we tried to utilize, open space and some graphics, but not get overly complicated with it, mostly just giving numbers. And we broke it down into sections. So the first section is, how many visitors we had and how many registered borrowers, what percentage of the population has library cards. And then the next section, we had the number of computer uses, number of programs, and the number of libraries that we have throughout the state. And then items circulated, our licensed databases, how many items there are statewide, as well as, because databases get a lot of hits, you usually have large numbers there. And our numbers, we have 6.2 million uses of the databases, 3 million full text retrievals, and the library card, the statewide library catalog, had 1.37 million, or 57 million, sorry, hits on it. And while these numbers up here, the number of visitors and the number of registered users may not seem large to outside states, those are pretty good for Wyoming. You have to remember Wyoming has the lowest population of all the states. So we like to use this percentage of the population that has library cards, because then we can compare ourselves to other states and see how we're doing that way. We'll go to the next one. We created this one to provide information on our in-house homegrown digital collection suite, which we thought was important to put what those products are down here, and then to provide a website for readers to see if they wanted to write it down or when they see it, so they can go to it. And the information we wanted to portray is how much it's grown over the course of 4 years. So 2013 to 2016, it's grown a total of 46%. Part of infographics is choosing the appropriate graphic to portray your information. And sunflowers grow pretty quick, and so we thought that would be a good one to use. This next one, we wanted to provide information on the database and electronic materials usage. So we chose to use different clouds to put the information into. We didn't want to provide too many numbers, because if you have too much information, it can get lost. But we still provided a web address that they can go to access audiobooks and ebooks and the online magazines. And then we try not to use too many colors. We try to just kind of stay in a sort of a color scheme, just trying to keep it simple. And then this last one, I will let Paige talk about. It's on school library visits.
Yeah, this is information taken from the fall enrollment, fall 2015. And the number itself, again, the enrollment was taken from the Wyoming Department of Education, but the survey that we send out collects the data about how many students visit the library, how many classroom visits there are. And so we took that information and compiled it into this infographic showing how many students out of 94,000 students what was the average number of students that visited their school library each week? And the data was reported as 555 students visiting, or was the average number of students that visited their school library each week. And the average number of classroom visits was 20.5 classroom visits a week to each school library. And then we had the average number of weekly visits each student makes. So each student, according to the statistic, each student made 1.65 visits to their school library each week. This is just a snapshot of one small portion of the data that was collected from the school library survey. As you can see, it's not a lot of information, just a few tidbits, and it's visually appealing. The colors are attractive, and it's laid out with enough space between the different tidbits of information that it makes it actually easy to read. And it's a nice infographic to just put up in your library, to send home with your students for parents to view, for your principal to see. You can also do this with your local data, with your school data, with your district data, and you can pull things like this and just make fun infographics that highlight one particular piece of data about your library. And you can even change that up and each week have a new infographic or a new factoid for display for people to see.
Those are the few examples that we have. We're hoping that those give you some ideas, and we're going to give you a few other examples here.
So here is a survey of 9th through 12th graders about the use of their school library. And notice the use of color in the survey and the student. There is a graphic of a student to indicate that this is data on students. And it's interesting information. A lot of people would be interested to find out how frequently students read for fun, how most of the reading is done, whether it's with print or online resources. I like the noise level, how many students think it's too loud, too quiet, or just right in their library.
So what is just right?
That's a good question. That's a good question, Thomas. What is just right? Well, apparently what is happening at that particular library is just right.
Yeah.
So it also shows what use the library gets for the most part, as well as what it's most helpful with, and the tools, the resources that students use when they do research. So these are some quick statistics that are interesting. The color helps make it appealing, and it's something that the community your library serves would like to know.
Here's another example of an infographic that was made by the Toronto Public Libraries. What I like about this one is that it's simple. It's broken down into two parts, so there's not, there's just two pieces of information. The first is that total circulation. It compares total circulation to other major metropolitan libraries, and just at a quick glance you can see that their circulation is twice as much as the Los Angeles Public Library, which that was very interesting, and a wow yes. factor there. And then looking at the next part of that, the Toronto Public Library has more annual visits than all of the attractions in Toronto. So just at a quick glance, it doesn't have to have a ton of information. It can be just a quick sort of a factoid. This might be a little bit more than a factoid, but
those are definitely wow factoids.
Yeah, definitely a wow.
This infographic was created by the Colorado State Library and is about Colorado school librarians and their role in improving student achievement. The important part of this example is that they used several sources of data in order to create the infographic and to tell their story. And they cited the different sources of data that they used, but it isn't just their survey. It was pulled from different resources, and it just highlights various things that school librarians do and school library programs do to help student achievement. It's also interesting to note that there aren't any numbers in this infographic. It is text, and so that's another way to highlight the value that your organization brings to your community. It doesn't always have to be numbers, but you can just put in a textual fact and people can read that. And it still makes it visually appealing and easy to digest.
So there's a few things to remember. Oops, I jumped ahead there. We wanted to let you know that there are some online free infographic software packages to get you started. It's not all that difficult to create an infographic once you have your source of data and the story that you want to tell. For graphics, for these various ones, some of them have, most of them have free graphics that you can use within the program. And templates, yeah.
Yes, they also have templates that you can use to make it easy.
And you can change colors, so you can get themes, all that stuff. And then they also, some of them have premium graphics that you have to pay for, of course. So it's like $1 or $2 per graphic. But most of them will let you import your own graphics. So if you have your own that you want to use, let's say you're doing an infographic on the programs that you've done in your library and you've got pictures of those, you can insert those pictures, or you can pull down line art or other copyright free sources from the internet you can save and use.
Yeah, you can really personalize your infographics with these programs and capabilities.
Oh yeah. And these are just 4 that we thought we'd share with you. You can come back, revisit the recording if you didn't have time to write any of these down. Maybe you've used these and you know more of them. I don't know, then maybe you could share those with us.
That would be great. So a few things to remember about infographics and using your data is that you're trying to tell your story, a particular story. You want to keep it simple, and you want to make sharing of it easy. You don't want to make it difficult to share across platforms. And the main thing, sometimes the hardest thing, especially when you're new to this, is just do it. And before you publish an infographic, you can play around with it and change it and delete it and start over. But it really is, it's a creative outlet for your data. So don't be afraid to start with that.
So the bottom line, put it out there. You've sorted and analyzed your data and put it into a communicable format. So the next thing you need to do is make sure that people see it. Put it anywhere that people will see it and associate it with your library, whether it's public, school, academic, or any kind of special library. Insert those factoids into your web page or on circulation notices. Your community wants to know. So plus you took the time to do it. Show off the work that you did and get it out there as much as you can. So that's...
Okay. And you can put interesting library outcomes on tabletop signs, library posters, bulletin boards. You can create an annual report. we've talked mainly about data that's already been collected or that we are collecting at the Wyoming State Library. You can also run quick surveys of your library, you know, maybe asking a question or two and use that data in infographics. But definitely put your story out there. Your community wants to know. Your community needs to know. They need to know the value of your library to the community and to society in general.
Show the data to support your requests. When you accompany requests with statistical data, you're also showing the value of your library. So it's important to highlight the positive impact that your library has on the community. So when doing your requests, instead of saying, I need this new material, try using something like this addition to the collection supports grade level 11.
Or the STEM program that you're trying to build.
Exactly, or an activity or program. Instead of saying, we need more of this, try this edition will allow X more users or uses that support test preparation, literacy, accelerated learning.
And show the data that supports your claim.
Absolutely.
More ways to use data are team with a classroom teacher to prevent or to present a student success presentation. Feature library outcomes that compare equally with teacher curriculum outcomes. Ask your principal to include library student success data in his or her school board presentation. And maybe you can make your own slide presentation that your principal can add to theirs. But the main thing is to remember to be creative. Try out different ideas, and some will work, some may not. But keep trying. Never be afraid to get your story out there.
So with that, we'd like to thank you for letting us share some data insights and practical uses of it to support your library. And we don't want you to forget that this webinar will be available on the Wyoming State Library YouTube channel, and you can revisit it anytime. And I believe there will be a PDF as well.
Yes, Thomas, there will be a PDF available on the Wyoming State Library website along with the archived link, and you'll be able to access it with the YouTube video when you go to YouTube. Now, contact information here. You can contact Thomas or myself, and you can also get on to the Wyoming State Library website or find us on Twitter. We use Twitter a lot. It's a great way to communicate. And thank you for attending. Now we will take questions if anybody has any questions about today's presentation. Okay, do you use a specific program to create the infographic?
I do. I like using Canva, but my process is I'll have a list of programs and their websites, and I start with one. If I don't like it, I move on to the next one. And I think in this case, I did do that. I started with one, I didn't like it, moved to the next one, which happened to be Canva. And once I find something I like, and I just stick with it. But it's kind of, it's a preference thing. Once you, what I like to use might not be what Paige likes to use, and she maybe will use a different program because it has an interface that works with how she thinks and how she sees things visually. So,
and I have used Easily, and I like it. It's different. It offers some different graphics, different templates. But I also like Canva because, again, the templates are different. And if I'm looking for something shorter, like maybe a postcard or an invitation, I'll usually go to Canva. But Easily offers me the templates for the longer infographics and some really great sophisticated templates.
And Pictochart is good if you have numbers and they can, fit in a chart. You just input the numbers and it draws the chart for you, and then you can, I believe you can save it as some kind of JPEG or something like that, or PNG or something, or PDF.
Yeah.
So,
So if you want charts, that would be a great one to go to.
it could be, yeah. I haven't used it, so I've seen it used a couple of times, and that's what I remember from it.
Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Any other questions before we leave this session? All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. And again, feel free to contact us if you have any questions about data or using data. And have a great rest of the week.